Alright shredders, today we're going to have a look at good braking technique to give you more control and confidence out there on the trails. So first of all, let's have a look at bike setup that could help with your braking. So the very first thing is lever reach. So I have my levers set up so I can have my finger curved right around when I'm not actually braking, and that means when I'm actually braking I'm using the stronger part of my finger and I get way less hand fatigue. If you have it wound really far out, then you just got it with the tip of your finger, you're just relying on this part of the finger and it's just going to get tiring. So check, you maybe have an adjuster like this and you can just wind it in, or it might be an Allen key in there, but have a look and see if you can just check whether or not your brakes are nice and close in so that you don't get tired hands. Another thing to have a think about is the actual lever angle. So I'm talking about this angle here. Most people would say that you want to have the lever kind of in line with your hands when you stood up on the bike, but that is a matter of personal preference and it's worth experimenting a little bit. It's quite important not to run them too down. If they're down here, you're actually having to curve your hand around to try and get that lever, and that's going to give you some problems in here. Now I actually made a video about cockpit setup and how it can brake angle and lever distance can help with arm pump and things like that, and you can check that out right here. You want to make sure that your brakes are in good working order, so when you pull on the lever it should feel nice and firm. If it's squidgy, it may mean there's air in the system and you need to get those brakes bled. If you're going somewhere, say the Alps or a big bike park, you might want to put some bigger rotors on. I'm running a 200 on the front here, and that's going to give me plenty of braking power. It's also going to mean that my brakes cool down quicker than, say, for example, a 160 brake rotor, which is going to get very hot very quickly. So that's something to bear in mind as well. And that can, again, depend on the type of riding you do. If you're doing long descents, lots of steeper sort of stuff, you may need bigger rotors. Another thing that can have an impact on your braking efficacy is your suspension and tyre setup. So very hard suspension and very hard tyres, it's going to mean that the bike is skittering over the top of rough terrain, rather than, particularly with the tyres, if they're a bit softer, they're going to be able to dig into that terrain better, and those braking knobs on the tyres are going to dig in and give you much better braking traction. Alright, so let's get down to the nitty-gritty of good braking technique. So the first one is to make sure you use both your brakes together. So according to the internet, that wonderful, excellent source of accurate information, about 70% of your braking power comes from the front wheel. So that means you do need to use the front brake. And you'll find, if you do an experiment, that your stopping distance using both the brakes together is pretty much halved than if you just use the back brake. So that is literally half the distance of when I just did it with the back brake. Both brakes together, way more effective. Basically, the better your braking technique, the faster you can go, because you know you can slow down quickly. But in order to do that, you have to use both those brakes together. Try and brake smoothly. You don't want to be grabbing like this because it's going to give you a lot of unwanted fore and aft weight transfer. This is what grabbing looks like. Look at how it pushes me forward and back. It really unsettles me on the bike. We really want to avoid that, so try and go with that smooth, firm action on your brake levers. So, you want to modulate your brakes. What does that mean? That means that you need to keep those wheels turning. You want to avoid locking that back brake up in particular, or the front. And to do that, you just need to be able to just let the brake off a tiny bit to reinstigate the turning of the wheel. If you've locked up the brake, all that's happening is the tyres being dragged across the surface of the ground, and it's the braking knobbles aren't digging into the ground, they're not slowing you down. And you'll actually notice, if you do it on purpose, down something steep, you do not slow down. In fact, you are more likely to pick up speed. So it's really important to have that skill to be able to modulate your brakes, just to let them off a teeny bit to regain grip. So one thing that's quite key to keep in mind is that, like, if we have grip at 100%, then braking is at 0%. And if we have braking at 100%, then grip is at 0%. So if your brakes are locked on, you're just skidding across the surface of the ground, you've got no grip whatsoever. So there's always going to be this balance to find between the two things. So from that, hopefully you can realise that for the maximum amount of grip, you want to have your brakes off. And so on something where it could be slippery, like on roots or rocks, it's good if you can do that brakes off. And that ties in quite nicely with the idea of trying to find places where there's going to be maximum grip to do all your braking. So for example, that could be before a rooty section, before a rocky section, before a corner, anywhere where there's a little bit more smooth trail compared to what's after it is going to be a good place to brake. So you've got to keep your eyes up and keep looking out for good places to do most of your braking. Do you brake with 2 fingers or 1? Well, ideally you want to brake with 1 finger. That means you've got full 3-finger grip around the bars, which gives you loads of control over bumpy stuff, and you can apply that brake. Now, if you currently brake with 2 fingers like this, you will actually have to consciously teach yourself to do it with 1 finger. I still clearly remember that it took me some time for that to feel natural. It felt so strange. So don't assume you can't do it because it feels strange. Persevere with it. Make sure you've got that lever reach nice and close, because that's going to make a big difference, particularly with 1 finger. But do persevere because it gives you much better control. You've got 3 fingers gripping, 1 finger for braking. Try not to drag your brakes everywhere. What happens when you drag your brakes a lot is that the brakes get very hot, and it can actually compromise how effective they are. And just let those brakes off momentarily. That's going to keep them, it allows them to breathe, and it means they're going to cool just that moment, just in that moment where you've let them off, and all those moments add up to the brakes not overheating. So taking all of those principles and putting them together should give you a really good, effective braking technique. And when you're confident in your braking technique, you can ride faster because you know you can stop quickly. So I hope you found those tips helpful. Don't forget, you do need to go and practice and just get used to how it feels if you need to change your braking technique at all. But it's worth doing because it's going to mean that you feel way more confident and you've got much more control out on the trail. As always, if you've got any questions, don't forget to leave them in the comments below. Hit like if you've enjoyed the video, and for more skills tutorials like this one, hit that subscribe button right now. And I gotta just say thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.